30's hot. Pauper 30's hot. Pauper 30's hot. Pauper 30's hot.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is the first RIW Hobbies Pauper podcast slash Twitch discussion. We've got a group here of just sort of the local weekly Pauper players, and we're just going to be chatting Pauper, just talking about the format. If you're listening and you have questions or comments or anything, feel free to drop those into the chat, and we'll interact with you directly. So I think a good way to start this off would be kind of to go around the circle and introduce ourselves. My name is Brian DeMars. I'm a writer for channelfireball.com, and I've been playing at RIW for 15 years now, so I love being here and just being part of whatever's going on at the store. So I'll pass it around. Let's just go around the circle.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm John. I run the Pauper here at RIW Hobbies. I've worked at the store now, just like Brian, for around 15 years. I have started a lot of the Pauper scene here in Southwest Michigan, Southeast Michigan, Southwest too. I just claim it all. And we want to get this Pauper podcast happening at least every week, at least once a week, maybe even more than once a week. Like Brian said, we have our Twitch stream growing. If anybody has any questions, feel free to drop a question or any comments in the Twitch stream. Other than that, I'm John. Here's Chris.
I'm Chris. I'm a local pauper grinder. The grindiest of grinders. I'm excited to talk about pauper with you guys. And I have no accolades to my name, so I'm just going to pass the mic along.
Oh, you got a 5-0.
Recent trophy winner on Magic Online. Look me up. It's out there.
I'm Cameron. I am also a grinder here. I have very few accolades to my name as well. I've top 8'd a couple 1Ks here, I guess. And yeah.
The local Tron expert.
Local Tron expert.
Whoa. I'm Dave Polzin. I play Pauper up here. Have been for almost a year and a half now. I have a modern deck, but I don't like modern. I have a legacy deck, and I'd like to play more, but mostly just play Pauper.
My name's Nick. I've been playing here for about a year and a half, but I've been playing Pauper for about 4 years now, online and then here. I have some very, very old historical top 8s and some other high-profile events, but haven't been playing dedicated Magic for quite a while. But I'm here to jam all things Pauper, and I love anything to do with blue cards, so that's probably what I'll be talking the most about. But
So these guys, being very modest, they're all Pauper experts. When I got into the format, they really embraced me coming up here, helped me with decks. Very good group of guys, awesome community up here. I can't really overstate
we've got
that aspect.
We've got a good thing going up here. We started the Pauper scene around 3 years ago now. It's grown exponentially since we started. The format basically sells itself. People can get into it super cheap, and you build as many decks as you want. Right now, the format's wide open, except for one card in particular that has been a hot button issue in the Pauper community lately. Arkham's Astrolabe recently printed in Modern Horizons. I know it's affected our local metagame here. It affects the metagame online. I think we should just talk a little bit about that for a little while and touch on some Astrolabe topics. I know I try to squeeze it into all kinds of different decks. It's allowing people for the first time in history to play 3 and 4 color Pauper decks without the hindrance of having comes into play tapped lands or the gain life lands, whatever you want to call them. I actually think it's a great thing for the format right now, but I could see it being an issue that basically every Pauper deck now is trying to squeeze in Stow lands and Astrolabe and just see how it goes. Is that good for the format? Is that bad? Brian, you played in a bunch of different formats over the years. What are your thoughts on Astrolabe?
Well, I was in kind of a weird position with my testing for the first week of the Premier League, where I kind of did most of my testing about 3 weeks ago, and I played mono black. But in the time after that, the format has really changed quite a bit. Because I had to spend the last 2 weeks testing modern, unfortunately.
Sorry about that, by the way.
Yeah, could have been playing pauper. It's so frustrating. But Yeah, I think just discussing like what this new metagame looks like is probably like a great place to start.
Yeah.
Obviously, the Astrolabe decks are a big part. Primarily, I guess we could talk about that chunk of the metagame real
Sure.
quick.
If you look at the most recent Pauper League's results, first place was won by a Jeskai Astrolabe deck. It just plays Astrolabe and then all of the best red, white, and blue spells.
Is it safe to say, you guys, that like Astrolabe, the primary place it's getting played is in the Jeskai sort of like good stuff blue decks?
Yeah, I think people have often wanted to be able to cast their Muldrifters and their Lightning Bolts and their white spells without having any issues with their mana. And it's been basically impossible up until now because you've been working with comes into play tapped and gain a life lands.
I think a big part of the metagame is also Tron. Tron also plays Astrolabe because it fits in the snow-covered islands, and it just has enough islands to play the Astrolabe, and it makes a lot of draws in Tron so much smoother because it's 4 more cantrips in the deck, it's 4 more mana fixes in the deck. It makes the deck just move a lot faster.
Gives it a lot of redundancy
Yeah.
too. I remember when I was playing Tron, I haven't played Tron in like 6 months or so, but like your draws felt so live or die based on whether you drew the prism.
Yeah.
But now you have like a redundancy on that effect, and it's such an important effect in the
Yeah,
deck.
absolutely.
So originally I thought the Astrolabe would homogenize the decks and everybody just played whatever they wanted. But you see Affinity popping up a lot more now. Elves is still consistent. They're not using that. I think
format is wide open right
yeah, from the results, like I can't argue it. And I'm starting to play it. I'm like, oh, I like playing 4-color.
Exactly.
Like I was thinking, what is it like cons when it was 4-color good stuff everywhere. I was like, that's what everything will be. But just playing it, and I think we've kind of like we started off and it was like a boy hitting puberty discovering themselves, and they were just all the Astrolabe decks were all over the place, and now it's kind of like but no, I think it's kind of boiled down to, like you said, Jeskai. Maybe it's heavy blue white, a little bit of red, but there's a few versions, and I think they occupy mid range. I wouldn't even count Tron as an Astrolabe deck, just that they use it. They're not bouncing it for effect or using it with prowess with like Seeker of the Way or something like that. But yeah.
One thing I would note, though, also is that this past challenge is the first time that a dedicated Astro deck, as a lot of people would sort of see that, has actually won the challenge. It's been performing quite well, but it's kind of given room for a lot of decks that prey on the clunkiness of the draws of Astro to sort of rise back up from tier 2 or tier 3 status where they had been during the Gush heydays. I will say I was a big fan of Gush, and I wasn't sure how things would look post-Gush ban, but I'm happily surprised by how diverse things look. And even though there are a lot of decks jamming Astrolabe, they're coming at it from different angles. The engines of the deck are very different. You still see Monarch periodically, and now we have the Ephemerate Archaeomancer that's sort of like risen up as a secondary engine as well. So even in the way that people are abusing Astrolabe, there's quite a bit of diversity. So.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think Astrolabe has kind of polarized the format to a degree, in that you have the Astrolabe decks, the big value decks, like we said, Jeskai, Tron, the Snowgo that's trying to bring back, lost the name of the card, Sprout Swarm. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have the non-Astrolabe decks, and those are basically low-to-the-ground, mono-colored aggro decks. You have Red Deck Winds, Burn, Stompy, Goblins, White Heroic. Affinity's not really mono-colored, but these low-to-the-ground aggressive decks. And I think time will tell whether that's going to be healthy for the format in the long run. Because, you can look at it one way. A different deck has won the challenge the past 4 or 5 weeks, but it's either been, a turn 4 aggro deck, or Tron, or Jeskai. So I'd be curious to get your thoughts on that, Brian.
Well, I actually had a question for you guys, which sort of like, while we've been having this discussion mentioning the Astrolabe decks, I know like Boros Monarch, if that's even like a thing anymore, it seems like it's kind of diminished. Is Astrolabe a deck, a card, is it just a blue deck card, or is it a card that we just haven't figured out how to use it in the non-blue
I think
decks
there's
yet.
definitely engines that can work with Astrolabe. People are using Core Skyfisher and Glinthawk to bounce it over and over again. So it's not necessarily just a blue effect. I think that blue decks can use it to affect maybe better than other decks, because like we were talking about a little bit before the podcast, blue's the only color in Pauper that gets 2-for-1s. So the compounding the fact that you have a bunch of 2-for-1s in your deck with Astrolabe to fix your draws, to smooth out your mana, can blue use it the best? Maybe.
That and the blue cards are just the best cards in the format, and being able to play the blue cards is a huge deal. And if you can afford to cast your blue cards with all these other cards in other colors, then you probably want to be playing the blue cards.
It seems like the blue is almost just like a free splash with the What the Astrolabe lets you do is take your white core Skyfisher gating synergy and then just splash blue for free.
It's not even a splash anymore. It's mainly a blue deck, but it plays a couple white cards in the deck, or it's some red cards, but it plays like Counterspell, and Counterspell is a heavy blue card.
One of the sort of, I guess, how you might define the nature of the format for a long time has been sort of tension between the aggro, mid-range, and Tron, sort of big endgame strategies. And certainly when Gush was prevalent, that was still around, but Gush seemed to kind of dominate all of that stuff. But I think that tension's still kind of present, because as Tron seems to take more of the meta share, then you see the aggro decks coming in. So I don't know that, I would say it's only for blue. It maybe seems to be that the blue decks abuse it best at certain times, because we've seen some Boggles lists that have been playing it. There are some Boros lists still out there, but they tend to get preyed on by Tron once they start to come up again. So
do you think, as we get deeper into the Astrolabe metagame and it becomes more developed and the people explore it more, do you think it will wind up being that it becomes polarized, where it becomes more of a blue thing and the non-blue decks move in a different direction, or do you think we just haven't found the right non-blue Astrolabe decks?
Well, I think you made a good point earlier off the air when you said that, well, all the good 2-for-1s in the format are blue, more or less. The best ones are all blue. So people are incentivized to want to play the color that you can preordain, ponder, Mull Drifter. Green doesn't have a Mull Drifter.
That is true.
So people are incentivized to play blue for other reasons. Astrolab just kind of lets them play blue and whatever else they want. So back to your question, I think that, people are going to look for any reason they can to play these high-value cards just due to the nature of the format. We have a lot of the best, value cards, like I said, Ephemerate, Mull Drifter, but we don't have a lot of the top-end in-the-game cards that other formats might have.
yeah, I think one thing that certainly favors blue is that a lot of the top-end card advantage spells are in that color. So decks that are just trying to play a fair game have trouble coming from behind against other blue decks or even against other aggressive decks. So you seem to be slotted into one of two categories. You're either being extremely consistent, everything a 4 of, and just very linear in your strategy, or playing blue and having that end game where you can overpower people with those kind of powerful blue spells.
It reminds me of playing Vintage back in the day, because blue just had such a mismatch of good cards that it felt like the format was very much warped around the fact that blue had more resources to work with than the other colors.
Everything you want.
Yeah.
I want to bring up a deck. It was by Lazoo 5-0 from the recent league. It's 4 Arkham's Astrolabe, 4 Prophetic Prism, and it's basically a mono-white Metalcraft deck. So Ardent Recruit, Court Homunculus, Glinthawk, Core Skyfisher, and Thraben Inspector. So it's got a really aggro package with a 3/3 on 1, and then followed up with 2 more 1-drops. But then late game, you're Skyfishing to bounce your Astrolabe, you're popping your clues, so it's kind of plays both. And it's just splashing red for Chain Lightning, it's splashing, it's got a lot of burn. So Chain Lightning, Galv Blast, Lightning Bolt, but it is still that Metalcraft mono white deck. Now it's embracing, the burn package. But I was playing the mono white Tron, was it Astrolabe into Carvex Torch the face, and then I don't know if that's a real deck, if that was just a week 1, week 2, and that's kind of faded away, but that's kind of an outlier, I feel like. I don't know.
Definitely we're in a point where it's unclear whether some of these decks are going to be able to punch through and we're just waiting for them to find the right configurations, or if they're just kind of having some fortunate league runs and are able to put up these 5-0s. We haven't seen too many of them perform very successfully in the challenges, which is right now our only major event, which is kind of why it's exciting to see that the format's become a competitively supported format, because hopefully we'll see larger events and draw more people in to brew and to innovate and do that kind of thing.
You guys want to use that as a segue to talk about the new exciting news that we've recently got?
The larger events. For those of you that don't know, Wizards of the Coast and Channel Fireball have announced that there's going to be a Pauper MCQ in Las Vegas. It's on August 24th for those of you that want to participate. It's going to be the first chance for people to qualify for a Mythic Championship by directly playing Pauper. There was a
paper one. It's the first time online.
Oh, so this is the first time online. There's going to be okay, perfect.
It qualifies
for MC Richmond. So if anybody's interested in playing that, definitely we want as many people to play in the online MCQ as possible. It's August 24th. If you were going to play in it tomorrow, what would you lock in? What 75 would you lock in if you're playing an MCQ tomorrow?
I'd probably play like Jeskai Astrolabe.
You just think it has the best solutions to the format, gives you the most game against the largest field.
I think there's sort of like a hierarchy of like the most powerful cards, and it's just that deck, because the Astrolabe fixes the mana so flawlessly, you kind of just get to play all the most powerful cards in the format. It's just the most efficient. Like, I didn't really have a ton of experience with the Astrolabe decks when I was playing in the Pauper League, and when I looked at the deck lists, I saw Adam Yurchik's list, and I was like, the best I can do is 2 and 1, because I can't beat this. There's no way.
Just playing all the best spells. Not to mention, Adam Yurchik is an awesome grinder. He's been a grinder in the Midwest region for over a decade now, and he recently has been putting up a bunch of finishes on Magic Online under the name Condescend. Adam Yurchik is Condescend, if you didn't know. I take his opinion very highly at Pauper and at Constructed Magic in general. I think he had one of the best decks in the league in the last week.
Yeah, just all his cards very solid, and then the Astrolabe just giving you redundancy of Prophetic Prism at less of a cost investment when you're looping it with your gating creatures, your Core Sky Fishers, and your Glinthawks. It's just like, I'm going to have to kill all of these creatures, and they're all going to draw a card. Like, this is just going to be a nightmare.
And I have to waste the card.
And on top of it, now my Wrench Mines, he has a free 0-mana counter spell. You can just pitch any random extra Astrolabe to counter my Wrench Mines. So.
Well, kind of riffing on that idea that there's all these new fun tools, and decks like Jeskai can sort of play a lot of those, if not all of them. I mean, we're in a state where we have a bunch of new cards that are screwing up the format, or changing the way we think about the format. I mean, people have alternatively called for bans for a number of different cards at this point, mostly Astrolabe, but there's lots of stuff that's been, I don't want to mention any particular content creators' names, but I'm sure you've heard of a few that have said some things, but I don't know, in some ways, we really just don't know what the power level relative to the whole format for a lot of these things. Astrolabe is certainly very dominant, but Ephemerate has, in the last couple of weeks, risen heavily in terms of play.
We've actually settled on the best version of Ephemerate yet.
I think it's too early to be calling for restrictions, or bannings, I guess in this case. But it does seem like a card that's very powerful, and it's also the kind of card that people like to play. You know, it's just like the deck where you feel real smart for playing it, because it's real good.
It's cute, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree with you that it's way too early to say that anything has necessarily broken the format wide open yet. We don't have a Peregrine Drake out there that's just dominating everything. And on top of that, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, some people who've been around longer than me, the past couple of months have to be the largest amount of change that has happened to Pauper since it became a format, with the big blue bands of, Gush, Gitaxian, Probe, and Daze, followed by Unification, followed by, Ephemerate and Astrolabe coming out in the same set. Whether they reprinted a Storm card, because that's always worked out so well in the past.
There's a ton of things.
Yeah, so a lot of things have happened recently. Yeah, I don't know if you guys can hear them, but Winding Way, Magmatic Sinkhole. I think Savage Swipe is another card worth mentioning. So there's a lot of great cards that have just recently come out, and people have not had time to settle on what necessarily might be that busted deck that calls for a ban yet, if it's out there. That said, I'm interested in another topic that we brought up earlier and kind of got away from. We heard what Brian would play at the MCQ if it was today. I'd like to know what everybody else would play as well. I think I'm on board with you with Jeskai, although my best successes have come with more of the aggro decks like Boggles. So I think Boggles might be what I sleeved up if I'm got a ticket to the Pro Tour on the line today. Nick, what do you think?
So I think one of the more powerful and older decks in the format, Tron, is still probably the top dog in my mind. At least that's what I favor playing, and I think that would probably be what I would lean on.
So if I was the best player like Nick at Tron, I would play Tron, especially since it's online and your opponent can time themselves out. If it's on paper and it's me, I'm probably going to play the a million 1-drop 2/2 red deck, and I'm going to Goblin Grenade people. That one's been having really good success. I guess comfortable with that, but I hate to see the second Seeker of the Way hit the table. Like, that's hell of a common.
I'd probably be playing Jeskai Astrolabe online. If it was a paper MCQ, I'd play Tron 100%. Tron's my go-to deck in paper. I just have a hard time with playing Tron online because it's such a click-intensive deck and requires so many individual things to do. And I'm not that good at that online yet.
Just gotta exercise your right hand.
Yeah, I'd probably be playing Jeskai.
I'm a firm mono black supporter. I'll play mono black till the day I die. I don't care if it's the best deck in the format or the worst deck in the format. I think it's actually probably about 50-50 against most matchups right now. Having a bunch of decks that play a one-mana artifact that they can discard to my Wrench Mines isn't exactly ideal, but I think that the old Chittering Rats and Unearth against most decks in the format can slow them down enough to where Gray Merchant can take over almost any game.
What if I told you that you can't beat Jeskai and it's the most popular deck? Would you still play Mono Black?
I would probably still play.
Fair enough.
Well, I think
That's Die Hard.
one of the coolest things about Astrolabe is that older decks have, like old dogs, have gotten new tricks. Because at one of the challenges recently, we saw someone playing a mono black that splashed white for Ephemerate. I don't think he was even playing Astrolabe. He wasn't. He just splashed white and used that to get multiple.
Ephemerate on Chittering Rats. I mean,
Yeah.
Ephemerate on Gray Merchant. It's good.
We got to get some Astrolabes into the Mono Black deck.
Yeah, I feel like Snow Swamp Astrolabe might be the next direction for mono black. We could even play some Gangrenous Zombies or something.
Mole Drifters.
All right, I'm on board. So playing 5-color mono black. I like it.
A prominent streamer I watch, his name is Entropy, or Birdman on Twitch. He tried that, and it was not as good as you might want it to be.
I also watch Birdman. He's the Tron player, right? He plays Tron pretty frequently in the leagues and in the weekly what are they called? The Sunday challenge.
The challenges.
Yeah, he's one of the proponents to playing Astrolabe. I think I've seen him use it maybe to the best effect in a Tron deck.
Yeah.
He masterfully somehow knows how to play lines ahead of time. I think that Tron being able to utilize Astrolabe just as much as the colorful decks of the format, I think it's good, is one of the strong cases for Astrolabe being a problem. The fact that Tron is already the best control deck and utilizes the most mana the best, and that it can just slot right into that deck. I think that speaks to how powerful Astrolabe is.
Is that a problem with Astrolabe, or is that a problem with Tron?
Well, I think I've had a number of conversations with I think everybody at this table, except maybe Brian and some other people around that. I guess it kind of depends on what you want to see in a format. If you like having powerful effects in formats, then I think you're more in favor of keeping a card like Astrolabe and cards like or effects like Tron around. But again, it kind of seems to depend on what you favor as far as what the game of Magic might want, what you might want that to look like. So.
Yeah, I think Tron, now that Astrolab's a thing and they can run 8 copies of a mana filter, the fact that the deck has essentially infinite mana by the end game and access to every color just makes it great. I don't think you can put it essentially on Astrolab and say that's what breaks Tron. I think the fact that they have 8 mana on turn 4 is what breaks Tron, and then it just gets worse from there. A deck like Jeskai, it gets to a strong in-game engine of recurring ephemerates and counterspells with Archaeomancer, but it can do that once a turn, whereas Tron, if you let the game go to turn 10, they're ghostly flickering 2 mnemonic walls and getting back every spell in their graveyard every single turn. And I think that's a much bigger problem than Astrolab.
I think at the end of the day, you still have a good, healthy aggro's doing fine. You have mid-range, and you have Tron. I think the outliers as well are like Affinity and Elves when you try and group them into. I remember we had a conversation about that. It's like, what are these? Are they combo decks? They have a combo element to them. Are they aggro? Like, how do you kind of classify them? But I think there's a healthy mix. I wouldn't, like we said earlier, any bannings. No, I think we're in a good spot.
That's one of the things I love
a lot
about
represented.
Pauper. Things like this frequently just work themselves out. The last time there was a real problem was Peregrine Drake. I don't know if a lot of you guys played during Peregrine Drake. It was horrible. It was miserable to play against. There were mirror matches all day, and it didn't seem like Magic to me. This doesn't feel like that at all. I feel like the format's changing. We're able to do more. People just haven't figured out exactly what to do against the lab decks yet, or the best way to play the lab decks.
I think the other problem with like broken decks in Pauper, like when we like the Dimir decks and the Izzet decks with like Gush and Probe and all that, like that was broken and it was metagame dominant, but the format was still like 1,000 times more fun than any other format. Yeah. So it's like that's like kind of an issue. It's like even if this deck if this deck's broken, it's not going to feel like long deck and vintage to you. Like it's just going to be a deck that like wins 58% of the time and represents 30% of the field because people are still going to play the decks that they like, and it's still going to be fun games of Magic. It's just you're going to be really handicapped if you're not playing the deck if it turns out that way.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, especially in paper. That's what makes Pauper so fun, is because there's just people that own 4 oubliettes and want to play them. Like, they don't get to play them in any other format. So, yeah, you see a much wider representation of the decks that are out there in paper just because people want to play them. They have fun playing their old cards.
Well, I mean, a lot of people were comparing the format to Legacy, and it's been called Legacy Light for quite some time. And I mean, I don't know that I would still designate it that, since we've lost so many of the cards that made us very similar to that. But yeah, it's kind of similar to Modern of maybe 5 years ago or something, where there was quite a bit of diversity, a lot of wide open stuff. I like those type of formats where there's a lot of access to different deck building choices and colors and all sorts of things that feel fun to play, like kind of the way that Brian was describing, old vintage or even old Legacy. I actually remember when Legacy switched from 1.5 to Legacy, and there was a similar kind of three deck hierarchy back then. It was goblins, kind of land still, and just random aggro decks other than that. But yeah, so I mean, I think we're more developed, further along than Legacy was as a format back then. But people are still kind of figuring things out, and I'm hoping that with more interest in the format, that we'll get more innovations of different kinds, because there's a ton of new cards, a ton of stuff out there. Yeah, so.
So I guess one question I have for you guys, and we've brought it up a little bit, do you prefer a format that's kind of rock, paper, scissors, like Pauper was maybe before the blue bans, where you had Delver that gets beat by Boros, that gets beat by Tron, that gets beat by Delver? Or a format like this where, yeah, maybe there's a few decks that look like they are doing a lot more powerful stuff, and another set of decks that just beat those, but you have a wider variety within that?
I think inherently most Magic formats devolve into the triangle rock paper scissors format just by the nature of Magic. There's a top tier deck, there's a deck that beats that deck, and then there's a deck that beats those decks, and that's just kind of how Magic is. I don't see that as a problem. especially because in Pauper there's no clear-cut combo deck, so to speak. There's no, there's the one land spy. There's no tribe deck now. There isn't really a combo deck. So you have a bunch of mid-range decks playing against each other, a bunch of control decks battling for superiority, and then a bunch of Tron decks trying to see who can use their mana the best. And I think that's one of the appealing things about Pauper is you still have that rock paper scissor, but there's a million decks to be rock paper scissor in. I mean, we're rock paper scissor Spock hand grenade right now. You know, we got a lot of options.
15 rocks.
There's 15 rocks. Yeah, exactly.
To piggyback on that, I think one of the things that drew me to Pauper originally, and one of the things that has kept me playing Pauper, is that you get the same kind of effects that you were describing in other formats, like Modern, for instance, but with a much higher investment of money. So if a card gets banned, I'm sure a bunch of people felt pretty bad about Bridge from Below being banned recently. So, you know, if your $1,000 or more deck gets banned, there's way more feel bads than when your $50 or $100 deck loses X number of cards. So that's one of the great things, I think, is that you can swap from deck to deck so easily with relatively small investment of money. So I've just been drawn to that for quite a while now.
Pauper's where it's at. I'm telling you. Been preaching it for years.
I think for me, what I look for in a format is that it's fluid in the sense that it continues to evolve. It doesn't just, it changes, new cards can come in, make an impact, make new decks good. It goes back and forth. What I don't ever want in a format is for there sort of to be an idea that there's a best one or two decks, and those decks are just constantly cannibalizing from the other decks in the format. So it's like every week when you go on MTG Top 8, it's like they went to like from 18 to 19, from 19 to 20, from 20 to 20. You know what I mean? Like that's what you don't want. You want a format where like the good decks only really can sustain being so much of the format because other decks can push back against them. Yeah. But and when they did the banning, it was to a point where it had been going in one direction for a really long time. So I'm glad they did the banning, and I hope that we reach sort of a point with the Astrolabe Jeskai decks where it's like they get to about 15 or 16%, and they stay there.
Sure, I would be fine with that.
I think that's like the ideal for the format.
Yeah, it seems like a good threshold.
Does anyone else have anything they want to chime in, or I'm done?
Well, I do like that Wizards is starting to think about Pauper and starting to print cards that seem designed along the lines of what we might enjoy. I don't mean to put my tinfoil hat on and go this direction too much, but I will say that I'm a little wary that I don't know how much they have paid attention to the format, like a lot of people have been playing for a long time. So I would hope that they wouldn't push things too far and break the format in ways that we don't want to see.
I think with them announcing the MCQ recently, having a paper MCQ in California not that long ago, it shows that it's on the radar. They're taking consideration of Pauper. They're paying attention, and I think that's only spells great things to come for the Pauper format and the Pauper community at large.
Wasn't there a to be determined? Was it Grand Prix in like Portland? I think at the end of the year.
There is an unannounced Grand Prix that is an unannounced constructed format. Yeah. There's a bit of speculation that it might be a Pauper Grand Prix. The other format that they've announced recently is Brawl. They could potentially be a Brawl Grand Prix.
Come on, it's not gonna be
I wouldn't imagine that it would be a Brawl Grand Prix. But
would you guys go if it was a Pauper Grand Prix?
If there was a Pauper Grand Prix, I would drive all the way to Portland and play in the Pauper Grand Prix. I would have no problem with that. Yeah,
I was already reaching the wheels with my wife to see if I could make it.
We're already planning it out, baby.
I've been saying for a year, if they do one, I don't care where it is.
We're going. Yeah, we're committed to go. We got a whole crew ready to go. I think that's actually a really good place to end for today. We do have a Pauper event coming up in about 10 minutes. It starts at 6:45 here at RAW Hobbies. If you guys ever want to play some Pauper in the local area, if you happen to be in the area, we play every Wednesday here at RAW Hobbies. And starting this week, we'll have Friday Night Magics. So our Wednesday event's going to be a $10 entry at 6:45. And if you go 4-0, you actually get $70 in store credit. We pay out all the way out to 2-2. If you go 2-2, you get your entry fee back, and you can play again next week for free. And then our regular Friday events for Pauper will be our regular Friday Night Magic payouts. But we are going to live stream tonight's Pauper event starting at 6:45. So if you're watching right now, make sure you stay tuned. It's only a few minutes away, and we'll have some live Pauper action for the rest of the evening.
And if you're not busy tomorrow night, maybe come check me out on Pauper Premier League.
I know
Show me some
Brian
love.
is playing in some Pauper Premier League tomorrow on CoolStuffInc.com. You can check out their Twitch channel. Tomorrow evening, I believe it's around 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time.
It's 8:30 Eastern Time.
8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. You can watch Brian DeMars pilot a deck that he's going to be piloting tonight here in our Pauper event. So you can see how he does playing against the likes of
Alex Holm.
Alex Allman will be playing tomorrow. I think. And Brian Koval will be playing tomorrow as well. So some awesome Pauper action. We get to cheer. I know I'll be cheering Brian on. So
I'll be up here at the store tomorrow playing.
We'll be streaming right here from the store. If you can come up and be part of the action, or watch from Twitch and enjoy the comfort of your own home and watch some Pauper action tomorrow evening. Oh yeah, and I mean, welcome to do that too. We appreciate everybody tuning in. I didn't see any questions in the Twitch chat, but if you have any questions, feel free to whisper them to us on our Twitch chat, and we can address them in our next week's episode of Pop It Like It's Hot here at RW Hobbies. Starting at, I think we're going to do 5:30 every week. Seems to be a good start time for everybody. So make sure you tune in next week, and we'll also upload all of our videos here on twitch.tv/RIW Hobbies. You can check our videos, and I know Brian DeMars will have some content coming up, hopefully in an article on Channel Fireball. Make sure you check out all of his articles there on Channel Fireball. And we appreciate you for tuning in for the evening.
Bye, everybody.
Pauper